All right. Okay. I'm moving for like 2 days. I moved for like 2 days. I moved for 2 days, and a bomb drops in the FM community. They're finally adding women to the game. How does that happen in the 2 days I was in the same place for a year, a whole year? And you can't drop it when I'm in the same place. You got to drop it while I'm driving halfway across the country. This is unbelievable stuff. I mean, they aren't even considering. Also, I just completely inexperienced. Look at that. I'm leaving my headphones on. Unbelievable. But in case you haven't heard, Football Manager is adding women's leagues to the game. I've read all of the different stuff that's been released on it, so we can talk about it, break this down about how it's going to be added to the game, when it's probably going to be added to the game, how it's going to affect the way that you play the game, and why, if you don't like it, you suck. You know what doesn't suck? Actually saving a ton of money while being a safe power user on the internet like yours truly. NordVPN can help you do that. And specifically, me working with NordVPN can save you like 75% and get you a bunch of free months as well, being safe on the internet. Do you not want that? If you don't, are you okay? I'm here. I had a guy messaged me about his relationship on Twitter the other day, and I really thought I helped. Zealand is not an accredited relationship counselor, and I would not recommend doing this on most occasions. But NordVPN is still awesome, and Zealand is more accredited to talk about that. NordVPN have decided to sponsor today's video, which is awesome considering I use NordVPN. Anyways, if you are trying to watch some match around the world, and because you're playing Football Manager and you're like, wow, I spun the globe, I picked a league, and I all of a sudden love this team and I want to watch their games. Well, you might want to use NordVPN for that, because you're going to be using some websites that could be coming after you just a little bit. Trying to enjoy the world's game is like playing whack-a-mole against viruses around the internet, or people trying to steal your information. And if you use NordVPN, well, then you're routing your internet traffic through a different point, and they just can't get to you anymore. Which is why I use it. It makes me feel smart. It's a global world. You want to watch a TV show in another country, you're like, yo. And then your favorite TV show is like, yo. You don't have to be tech savvy to use it, right? NordVPN is super easy to use. Look at it. Are you seeing this right now? It's really simple. You sign up, you use code Zealand to get 73% off. It's less than £3 a month, right? That's less than what you spend on some stupid snack at the end of the grocery store run that you've been putting off for 2 weeks. You can have 6 devices on your account. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee, even though the money, it's like £2.50 a month. But hey, maybe you really do want that snack at the end of the grocery store. I love Reese's too. That, or you can be safe on the internet. Your call. And you also get 4 months free using code Zealand. And you get less than £3 a month for freaking 2 years with code Zealand. I can be a part of your life for 2.5 years on NordVPN. And in a grand total, you're spending like $30 over 2 years. I can't even process how far away 2 years is. I can't do it. If you want more information about what a VPN is and how it works, of course, you can head to NordVPN's website to learn about that. Let's get back to talking about women's leagues in Football Manager, because this is a gargantuan development that you had to know was coming, right? This is something very important to point out, because I am very aware of the fact that most of you do not live in the United States. In the United States, the women's team gets more views than the men's team. Evidenced by this article on CNBC. U.S. viewership at the 2019 Women's World Cup final was 22% higher than the 2018 men's final. So I'm going to use that and the fact that the United States is generally just a headstrong, particularly annoying society when it comes to sports to prove that women's soccer can be successful, will continue to get more successful. And if you don't believe that, I mean, it already happened. So there's a lot of factors that contribute to something like that, but I'm just going to use it to generically swat away the people that are like, nobody cares. Clearly that is factually wrong. So let's move on to what's happening in Football Manager, shall we? The way that it is being added to the game is the same as any other league, okay? But it is not nearly as easy, because a lot of the fine-tooth parts of the game that are taken for granted when you're adding another men's league have to be adjusted for the women's leagues. We'll get into why that's so complicated, but in terms of how this affects you actually playing the game, they are not making an independent Football Manager like Women's Football Manager or WFM. May I say right here, what we're doing is adding women's football to FM, one sport, one game. But this doesn't mean that you are forced to play it. For those people that are logically going at this like, well, I support the idea of women being in the game, but I don't want to play anywhere near them. They have cooties. If you're one of those people, it's going to be like any other league. You can turn it on, you can turn it off. Okay, and if you want to have it in the universe, you can switch back and forth between coaching one side, coaching the other, right? Being in the men's game, the women's game, coaching a women's national team and a men's club team, whatever you want to do, that's going to be in the game just like any other league, just like any other competition. And if you feel like somehow this is going to ruin your experience, you really have an ingrained fear of cooties, then that's okay. You can have those leagues off. Or if your computer is really small and you're like, my smart toaster that I play Football Manager on isn't going to be able to handle more leagues. They're not mandated. Chill. Or as Miles words it, mildly strange way, women's football will be part of the living, breathing world that constitutes every one of your Football Manager saves. So that's how it's going to be added to the game, but why hasn't it been added already? That's the other direction. Well, it takes years to do this sort of thing. Let me give you a few examples. One, they said it's going to cost millions to do this, to add women into the game, and the return on that is not initially going to be as high as that actual ad. So this is more of an activist approach and an anticipatory approach for the growth of the game than it is driven by the market, even though the market will obviously respond. I mean, Football Manager got a ton of coverage for this immediately after it dropped. All you have to do is look at their Twitter page, which is like nonstop, like the goal, BBC, like your local newspaper, right? Everybody was writing stories about it. It was great press coverage. And when it comes out, that'll happen again. But it's not going to come out next year. It might not even come out the year after that, because you don't just spend millions and it happens immediately, especially in a world that's fluctuating in and out of COVID. This is where me knowing some of the developers comes into play here, because then you can get an understanding of how much stuff goes into redesigning the entire match engine, because that's what they're doing. Right off the top, there is the incredibly annoying situation where you, for me, this would just be so labor intensive, right? You have to add all of the data in, right? So what Football Manager does now is they've had a database for, as it says right here, 28 years. They've had a database that has been growing on the men's side of the game. The women's game, you have to create that from scratch. They already have a research team in place, but depending on how many leagues you want to add, which they're saying multiple leagues, I'm going to go ahead and guess like 8 to 10 women's leagues off the top that they're going to be adding, and then some other players maybe around as well. That is sheer guessing. But if you want to do that, you are talking thousands upon thousands upon thousands of players that you have to get scouts for, that you have to research, that you have to fill in a preposterously large number of attributes for, assuming they use all the same attributes, and there's no reason that they wouldn't, right? You've got your physical, you've got your mental, you've got your technical, you got the height, weight, personality, agent, favored players, you've got all of your hidden attributes, which, you know, they tweak a little bit every year, but you're normally coming in at about 9 hidden attributes that you also need to have assigned for every player. And then, of course, where those attributes are supposed to be on current and potential ability for every player. That's just the spreadsheet in the numbers game. You then have to complicate the situation, and this is where I was probably most frustrated with the announcement that Miles made, which generally, look, this is amazing. It's great progress. I will play it, obviously, because it's the only database the US is going to be the best in the world in. Get out of here, Sweden. But what frustrated me is this paragraph. To get our women's database right, we will have to examine every single in-game attribute and define exactly how we judge that data. Good. We've been asking this. I assumed they were going to create a whole new 1 to 20 range in terms of what the attributes turned into on the field, because you don't want to have them in the same attribute ranges as the men, right? Attributes such as pace, acceleration, and agility will likely stay the same. Weird, but okay. Some attributes may need a different scale. These attributes will feed into our match engine, and work done in this area, like height of players, now that affects aiming shots high if a goalkeeper is smaller, will be a benefit of the match engine overall. See, this is losing the forest for literally a single tree, right? He gives an example of how this might tweak, because goalkeepers will be a little shorter, and so shots are going to be going higher more often, and how often do you want that sort of thing to happen, to what attributes might need a different scale, why might they need a different scale. Those are things that I feel like I'd want to know. Are we going to create a whole new scale for the women's attributes, or are we going to play them on the same scale? That was always the huge question for me when it came to making a women's database, and it just was not answered here, so we don't know. but this is still a few years off. And then there's a part of Football Manager that I feel like being able to hang around the developers, I've talked to people about this, you don't think about if you just play the game. Even if you dump all over the graphics, the movement and all that stuff and all the different actions, those aren't just like animated randomly, those are all motion captured. So the next step to adding women to the game is you have to go through and motion capture every single action that a player can take in the field, because you can't, this is actually great, you can't motion capture the men and then translate it onto a female model with their different body type and bone structure, because they are anatomically correct in Football Manager. They have like the right bone structures and everything is the way that they word it. He says it makes them, well, move like cowboys when you do that. While I would love to see this, they have to go through and motion capture everything, because if you re-release a new Football Manager every year, you've got a lot of your motion captures done already. Whatever moves you want to add to the Football Manager match engine the next year, you add that to your motion capture data and translate it into the match engine. For the women, they're gonna have to redo everything. Then you have to bring in the art and animation teams to animate the 3D models. And particularly the women's football kits are also different because of the whole body shape question. So that's just on kind of the match engine side. You have, well, building the database, you have the attributes, then you have the motion capturing, and then you have the different art and the translating the different bone structures from just the staff models they had of women to actually being on the field in the match engine. And this is all on top of FM being FM. How detailed should we go initially? There's a lot of existing literature available about the impact of menstrual cycles on training and injuries, but how do we incorporate this into the game without having a major effect on gameplay? And what about pregnancy? So this is always how detailed Football Manager is looking to go, is willing to go in these situations, and that's what makes the game great to play. But at the same time, they have to work out all these things. Do you want to add the idea of menstrual cycles into the game? There is, like he says, a lot of literature about when your training schedules are supposed to come in and everything else, but you also don't want to make it too big of a feature in the game, because it's not too big of a feature in real life. Or pregnancy, how often is your player going to get pregnant? Is it a hidden attribute, right? These are the things that they have to think about that are completely separate from anything that's ever been done in Football Manager before. But with the emphasis on realism, they need to be around. And then, of course, there's the question of the text, because there, even if you feel like aren't enough options when it comes to the media and everything else, this game is in 19 languages. And they've calculated that there's about 100,000 strings that need to be rewritten for the women's leagues to be in the game. Different questions, different conversations you have with players, those sorts of things. Times 19. And don't worry, I didn't do this myself, they did. That's 3 million words that need to be rewritten for all the different languages. That in itself requires like so much time, right? To just structure the game so that it can support and make sense the women's leagues. And all this is going to take a ridiculous amount of time, but they've already started. And I'd heard some rumblings about it before, that they've been working on this for years, slowly expanding their team. They've already completed, I mean, look at these motion capture sections, like sessions. They look ridiculous, right? They've already completed the first 2 motion capture sections. There's a lot more that they're going to still have to do, but they've already started working on it. They've already hired a full-time research head for women's football, Tina Keach. And then they go into when this is going to happen. They just say as soon as possible. It's a multi-year project. All of this research and code writing and the strings and the words being rewritten and the motion capturing and the decisions on training and menstrual cycles, that's all happening at the same time. But they don't know. My guess would be FM23, because they continue to ramp up the amount of staff that they need in order to pull this off. And that's what they say. You're still going to be getting all the features you'd expect from new versions of FM by adding resources to the existing team. So you're still going to be getting all of your new features. They're just also adding staff members to try and get the women's leagues into Football Manager as quickly as possible. So fortunately, we're still getting all of the features that we normally expect from each new game, right? We're still getting the same number of improvements, and the women's leagues will be here in 2 to 3 years. Sounds good. Just hope the US is still good by the time it gets out.